Shirt show. All right, let's go. Shirt show. Talking shirt. Shirt show. Talking shirt. Shirt show. Talking shirt. Shirt show. Shirt man. All right, episode 29 of Shirt Show. We're talking with Frank from GSF in Chicago. Let's go.
Frank.
What up? Hey.
What's up, guys?
What's happening?
Beautiful. Just beautiful.
We were wondering if you were going to have a Santa outfit on.
So what's going on, man?
Nothing, brother. Just another day, right? Year's almost over. Let's bring on 2021.
Yeah, for real. Were you working at all today or just kind of came in?
Yeah, no, I worked a little bit this morning. It was kind of a messed up day. I had actually guys work in the back today and came in, checked on them, went home, had to take my dogs to the groomer, then came back, and I've been here. I actually got my son actually working in the back right now, finishing up. He's the last one here. But, yeah, I like you guys. I mean, you work when you have to, and
yeah,
you don't have any set hours or anything, right? So, but
are you guys like backed up right now or busier than normal?
We're not busier than normal, that's for sure. It's 2020 has been a strange year, like everyone else. We're definitely down, but we are busy, so I'm thankful for that. I was looking at some numbers and stuff, and I'm down 30%, and it just we're definitely down, not as busy, but we are busy, and like I said, I'm thankful for that. We normally do about 15,000 frames a month. I was looking at my numbers, and we're down to like 10.5. So we're not, but I don't have the same workforce as I had last year. So things are okay though. I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
So 15,000 frames a month. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
For us, for me to hear, like that's just a crazy number. 15,000 frames. Are those brand new or those restretches or
a combination of everything, right? Between brand new and restretches, and it's just a combination.
So I guess let's go back a little bit before I get into too much screen talk. So how did you get started with the whole thing?
Wait, so hold on. I want to know that too, but let's phrase it like this. How did you become the best screen guy in the world?
All right. Long story or short story? What do you guys want to hear?
Whatever you want, man. I want the nitty gritty.
All right. So actually, I was in high school. My dad and my uncle, actually it was my uncle. You guys, Andy, you might remember him, but you remember Advanced Process Supply?
Don't know.
Okay. Well, they were the big guys back in the 80s, and in late 80s, they and prior to that, they were the big guys, right? They were, I don't know, M&R, NASDAQ combined back then, right? And my uncle worked for them, and they got bought out by a financial investing group or whatever. And my uncle saw the writing on the wall, basically, and he was the branch manager up in Toronto. Well, back then in the 80s, most of the screens were made out of wood, right? I don't know if you remember the stretching, the rope and tope, groove screens where you just put ropes, they didn't even glue them down. They just like... Wow. I wish we had them, but just to show. But my dad was a welder by trade, okay? And my uncle opened up a supply shop up in Toronto and got my dad into it. And it's like, hey, I want to start welding aluminum frames instead of wood frames. Well, he was a welder by trade, and went up there for a couple years. Then 1990 came, and he's like, all right, what are we going to do? We're going to open up shop in Chicago, or we're moving up the family. And then, after talking with my mom and everything, I got one brother and two sisters, and I'm the oldest at the time, right? And it's like, they really didn't want to move everyone up to Canada, so they opened up a shop down here. we started making frames, started stretching screens, and long story short, my uncle and my dad split up, and I started working making screens. I mean, I was 16 years old. You know?
You were working at your dad's shop?
I was working at my dad's shop, and obviously I was in school, but it was tough. I mean, I remember some days, and it was just go to school, come to work, do my homework, whatever it was, and then there was some long nights.
Weekends too. Yeah.
So it was, and we grew, we got bigger, and started doing more things. We catered to the graphic side of the industry, right? Large format printing, posters, decals. So it just took off, right? And took about 2 years. So it was like 92. Graduated high school, and then I went to college. Was going to college, and I was still working part-time for my dad and everything, and then finished.
Did you when you went to college, did you know you were going to take over, or did you just be like, I want to go?
No, I always loved it, because here, funny story, right? When I was in high school, I took a shop class or whatever, a screen printing class, a graphic arts class, whether it was, they offered like screen printing and offset printing and all that, right? And we all had a job that we had to screen print, right? And Andy, you probably remember the show. I'm not sure about you, Dylan, but remember Beverly Hills 90210?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So
he definitely liked that more than I did.
So what I did is for my project of producing shirts, right? I had to create the artwork and everything. Well, I did it where it was, Roselle, Illinois, 60172. And I just to play around or whatever. Then all of a sudden, everyone saw it in the high school, and they all loved it. I must have had it. I printed and sold probably 300 shirts. I just kept getting repeat orders. It was the class, the most successful project for the class, put it that way, as far as.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So when I did that, that's when I really started liking screen printing, right? And as far as I never thought of, take over for my dad, or because I had my brother was also working. He's only a year younger than me. But then, in the 90s, I had so much fun with it. I really did. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And I still have fun, and I enjoy it now, but something really clicked for me, and I just rolled with it. Right. Mm-hmm. We got bigger and bigger. We started just making frames, and it was about 2 years after of making frames, we started stretching screens. Right. And then, I finished up with college. I started learning a little bit more about the industry, start distributing some products, and just, we just celebrated 30 years this past June.
Happy birthday. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So when you stretch screens, I know we had a conversation a while back. I think maybe it was this summer. And you and I have known each other now for a little over a year, maybe a couple of years. I first started restretching screens, and I was restretching them with standard. Mm-hmm. And then we started to have a conversation about this thin thread stuff, which we'll get into. But when you stretch a screen, I know you told me this summer that it used to be you would have a table and you would stretch multiple screens at a time. And now you have a new process where you just do, is it one screen at a time?
Yeah. It's there's a few jobs where we do multiple, but yeah, going back to it, right? Graphic screen fashion, right? GSF, that's what GSF stands for. We always cater to the graphics side of the industry. But back then, when you're doing a frame that's 7 feet by 14 feet long, you can't gang them up. So we learned how to stretch screens properly individually, right? And you put your time into it. So over the years, we've always started shifting. There was more textile screens we started doing. So to be competitive with, all the imports that started coming in and everything, we had to do multiple screens at a time, where we ended up giving the better stretch screens, but and we still did screens individually, but not as many. So we kind of just went back to the old roots, I guess you can say, where we figured out a way to keep up our production and producing the screens.
What's the benefit?
Well, you're pre-stressing the screens. That's one of the keys. To hold the tensions right, you need to make sure you start with a good quality screen, a screen that it's not thin and that's going to bow and flex. So
now that was one thing that I was told from a lot of these shops that buy screens, like on, whatever, they get them overseas or they buy them on Amazon or whatever they're doing to buy these screens, is the aluminum thickness. Yeah,
that has a lot to do with it. We carry, I think 30 or 40 different profiles, depending. We'll recommend a size profile for the strength of the size of the screen, right? We want to make sure that the frames, and it's key that you have a stronger screen when you're stretching multiple up, because what will happen is some people, what are doing it, especially overseas, when they're doing multiple ups and they're using a hard locker table or just a manual crank stretching table, they're just throwing the screens on there, slapping the mesh, gluing it down. They're not pre-stressing the frame itself. So by the system that we have are pneumatic clamps, and each clamp only covers 10 inches of the frame. So for a 23 by 31 size screen, you got 8 clamps for that to go all the way around. So you're putting stress against the frame. So then after you're stretching the screens, you're releasing it, the frame is going to be pre-stressed, and then you're pushing in the sides in, basically, for some people that don't know what that means. And you're making it tighter. So if you don't have a strong enough screen, that frame will relax back out, and now you just lost, 10% of your.
I had no idea. Dylan, did you know that? I know that you would stretch the mesh and then let it relax, but I had no idea you would actually do that to the frame too. Like I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's big. I mean, it's key. Now there's a fine line, right? You can get away with it depending on tension levels, but if I gave you a 23 by 31, which our standard is 070 wall, right? But if we beefed up to a different profile, 125 wall, double the thickness, double the frames, double the strength, that'll actually even hold even better tension than the 070 wall. But like I said, there's a fine line. The 070 wall is more than adequate. And that's the thing here is there's a lot of people out there give even thinner frames, and it's key.
Well, that's the thing is I've ordered thinner frames before, and I didn't realize you're getting a cheaper screen, and you're like, oh, I found a place that gives me cheaper screens. But then you end up finding out that the aluminum's thin, and then what happens is the aluminum ends up tweaking, and then you can never get your registration right because the frame is twisted.
Exactly. That happens two ways, right? First of all, the frame's not strong enough. That's one way. And then, of course, if the frame gets banged around, it's easier to whack it, and it's not flat anymore, right? Or it's out of squareness. So the stronger the frame and the better the welds that you have, the more secure that frame is, and that won't happen.
Sorry. Dylan, go ahead.
Well, I was going on the frame thing still, and we've had this before. Obviously, not with Frank. We haven't had this issue. But do you guys do some testing when it comes to the welds, as far as making sure they're watertight? Because we've got frames before where it's not welded 100%, and then the frame fills with water when you put it in the dip tank.
Yeah, great question there. So, we don't actually check everything, because the only way that you're going to check is by putting it into a dip tank or a container and actually doing your test that way. But our welders are pretty good. I mean,
if you do it every day, obviously,
it takes too much time. Our frames are actually guaranteed that they will not leak or crack at the weld. So if any of my frames you ever have water in them, you just got to let us know and we'll replace them or repair them depending on what it is. So we just we know our track record, so we don't do the testing. But I do have a guarantee on our frames that they won't leak. The trick to
that's
that
all that really matters.
Exactly. The reason why they'll leak is because some people aren't putting enough penetration. When we weld our frames, we're TIG welding them, right? And it's not the most fastest way of welding material or aluminum or steel, but it's the best way to weld aluminum. It's almost like a craft, an art, like stretching screens.
Oh, for sure.
You're balancing the heat and enough welding rod, and you don't want to go too fast. Otherwise, you're just putting a bead of weld on top of it. And what happens is when you go to grind that weld off, you just took half the strength. So you want to make sure that the welding is actually basically going through the frame inside there, and that's where the penetration comes in.
Now, do you have a group of guys that just weld frames all day long?
Yeah, I got 2 guys that weld frames all day long. I don't know how many guys right now. Like I said, we're not as big as we were, but I got 1, 2, 3. I got 11 guys back there just producing screens. Now, I got 2 welders. I got two guys prepping, finishing, and then stretching. I got another 6 or 7. It really depends, but yeah, it's a team effort. It's everyone does their job. I don't want to say we have an assembly line, but we got a pretty good workflow where everyone does their part, right?
Now, does anybody produce wooden frames anymore other than for hobby stuff?
There are a few that are still out there. Wood frames, it's a shop philosophy, right? Again, it's what you put into your product, right? There are some pretty cheap wood frames, but I've actually seen some really good wood frames out there where they're using a stronger wood. They're polyurethane them, dipping them, and everything, and they're not.
But why not just go to aluminum at that point? Like, why bother?
Well, the wood frames are dying in the industry.
I would say, have you ever heard of Ryan Screen Supply? Or
Sure.
Did you ever hear of them? Yeah, they were out of St. Louis here. They had
Mike Lynn. I know.
Yeah, Mike Lynn.
Yeah.
A guy named Ralph that worked there too.
Yeah.
But that was that's where I first started buying screens. And when I first started, I bought wooden frames.
Uh-huh.
And they would stretch them there. They had, did you really too?
Yeah, well, we would get them from Pocono Screen before he sold it. But yeah, we would get wooden frames from them. It was just funny. Like, when we found out about, basically when it got to the point where we were like going to go auto or get a bigger manual, we were like, oh, we're going to get, because we were getting 2024s wooden ones.
Sure.
And then we were like, all right, we got to get auto frames. So we ended up getting 2331s, but then we started getting all aluminum.
Yeah, I started with 1820s and then I moved to the 2024s, and I thought it was a big shot once I got those bigger ones. But I used to get them from him, and he had they converted an old school into their manufacturing facility. Yeah. And the reason why I switched was wooden frames, they would, if you get them too wet for too long, they warp over time. Just like you were talking about with those aluminum ones. And so when I used to, before we had CTS, we exposed with film, actually vellum.
Yeah.
And so the vacuum would suck it down, and I had this super warped screen one time, and the vacuum sucked it down and it broke the glass on me.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
so I was like, all right, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, even wood actually absorbs moisture. Think about it, right? Your emulsion's not drying on some of them, it just, I've seen a progression, how much better and more educated everyone's got, and this industry is great. But that's one of the problems with the wood. If they weren't dipped in poly, they would absorb all the moisture and everything. And I mean, I remember walking into a shop one time, he was exposing the screen, and there was actually a little bit of like chemical and puddle on his vacuum frame because it was just, it wasn't a dry screen, right? And it absorbed. It was dry before you put it in there. It was like, but it just, that's one of the bad things with it, right?
Yeah.
So
what are I guess, your range of screen sizes you make? Like, do you make just about anything, or is there like a daily, we got to have stock of everything?
We should make every order stretch to order. I mean, I built up an inventory of the standard textile ones, but every order that comes in here is customer. We're a job shop, basically, right? I don't stock or inventory stretch screens or anything. I make little screens to print pens, right? And then I shit you not, I got a screen that my biggest size screen that I've ever made was 27 feet long, right?
Like, how do you fucking coat that thing?
They did it manually. It's funny, right? Because these guys were in Chicago, and we would have to go up the elevator shaft to get them up there. They would put them on a pulley system with chains, and guys were just pulling up the chains and pulling up the elevator shaft to get them up there. It was wild.
That's crazy.
We had to weld special eye hooks on them so they could get them up the shaft and everything. Yeah. But I guess the most common large format one nowadays, and it's kind of backing off, slowing down, but it would be an 82 inch by 156 for the M&R processor. I don't know how familiar you are with all M&R's printing presses, but they're large format graphic. They don't make a lot of them anymore, but they're still out there, and I think they're still selling them. But that would be, so that's what, 14 feet long by 7 feet wide? No.
Yeah, it's out of my range of what I want to deal with.
So yeah, I mean, we're all over. To answer your question, I mean, honestly, I make frames from 4 inches by 7 inches to whatever.
Yeah.
We're all over the place.
We've gotten to know each other pretty well over the past couple of years, and it was mainly because I was trying to learn thin thread, and I was on this quest to print the best white, and I had an idea, and it was going to be that we were going to use thin thread, and our thin thread that we were going to use was just going to be on our white. Like, I wasn't going to convert every screen for like top colors and everything else. Okay. I just wanted thin thread for our underbase because I had an idea of what it would do for us. And so we started with a small batch, and you helped out so much. Like, you sent me your thickness gauge for art so we can measure our emulsion. You sent me different mesh counts I could test, and we'd go back and forth and until I finally landed and figured out that, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And so once we learned that, how we could print with our white and what the advantages of printing with thin thread, and specifically, I guess, we order the Hydro, we order Sadis. I know there's other like Smart Mesh and things like that, but we order the Sadi. But once we figured that out, once we saw it, once we saw the detail, what an impact it made. I understand that it's not as durable, and so once we learned how to be more gentle and handle it and didn't pop them all the time, we were like, well, what are we doing with, why wouldn't we want to have our top colors the same thing? And so every screen we have in our shop is thin thread. I think maybe we have 3 screens that aren't. Unless I'm wrong, they're the 60 mesh.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I think they're standard. But I mean, every single frame, we converted all of them. So we tore out the mesh and sent them up to you like a pallet at a time because we couldn't do without a whole pallet. And you taught me how to fit the most frames on a pallet.
We tried.
Because, you covered shipping halfway or one way for us. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you'll do that for everyone because...
Yeah, you need to stop talking about all these things he's helping you out with.
Yes,
he's going to be fucking buried with it.
So everybody, if you need a thickness gauge, Frank will lend you his, right?
I will. I will. I first got to get back from Andy, though.
Yeah, I still have it. I still have it because we're constantly doing
sticky fingers at Andy.
Well, it's so valuable because here's the thing. Like, I know this is off the thin thread part of it, but the thickness gauge... you can only, unless you are measuring how much emulsion you're putting on your screens, it's just a guess. You're like, oh, I think it's more, or it doesn't seem like as much. But we wanted to know exactly how much emulsion we're putting. And the thing is we had all those numbers figured out with our standard, and then we brought in thin thread, and it's all a whole different. You got to start over.
You start all over.
You got to start all over. 158 thin thread holds way more emulsion than a 158 standard thread, and so everything. We had to change what we did in our coating and everything like that, and so.
Right.
What are you doing right now?
How are we coating them?
Yeah.
1-1, it's sharp. I mean, that's on our Unicoat. And so you have Unicoat, right? So
yeah,
the thin thread we coat 1-1 sharp, but we didn't used to do that with standard. And it's also pretty complicated too for those with auto coaters. If you ever, what I didn't know and I learned about this is that, and it's probably, I guess this holds true for manual coating too, but the more full your trough is, the more emulsion you put down. And so we would load up the Unicoat, and Unicoat uses 2 troughs. You coat it the front and back at the same time.
Well, it's got that weight behind it. Like the emulsion in the scoop has like more weight behind it to like force it together if you have more in it. Yeah,
so like you're coating at the same time on Unicoat, and so they go together and then they go up the back, front and back at the same time. And when you start off, when you fill your troughs, when you start off is different than when you're halfway empty. And so the reason why we figured that out is because we coated a bunch of screens and then we measured them with your gauge, and we're like, what the fuck? Like how are they not the same? We just used an auto coater, same mesh, but yet there was a variance. And then we were like, oh, is it because we let it run down to almost the bottom and then fill it back up with emulsion and then coat some more? And that's exactly it. And so now whenever I coat screens, I only let it go down.
Yeah, we top it off.
Kind of like my car, my Jeep, I don't ever let it get empty, and I keep some gas in it. And so same thing goes. You top yours. So how do you're saying that you don't let it get too low before you fill it back up? Yeah.
No, we fill it up, and even M&R said that when it was here to like try to keep it as full as possible all the time. So we pretty much fill it when you use it, and then when you start to see it get like halfway, fill it back up to the top.
Well.
Yeah. If you didn't do that, then you would have to slow it down, right?
Right.
How fast it's going to go.
Put a different recipe in. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that changed my mind when it came to like the EOM stuff was just seeing like microscope pictures of, like a thin coated screen and how there's no actual wall for like the ink to fall into and like give like a nice stencil. There's no gasket.
Your print shoulder,
right.
Sure.
It's just so like jagged and not there. And then you're like, oh, that makes total sense why I'm getting sawtoothing and, not laying down a good print and it's too heathery or whatever. You need that wall, you need that stencil. So yeah, that stuff's super important.
When we were using standard thread before we converted, we were like, okay, we're going to get the craziest EOM, like unheard of. I know it's recommended to have 15% or between 10 and 15%. We were like, we're going to double it, because we want our white. We want to put down just a crazy amount of white. And so we were going into the 20s. We wanted to be above 20 in our EOM. And unless you have a gauge, unless you have something to measure that, you're only guessing. And so it was awesome. So I appreciate you lending us. And that's why I haven't given it back.
No problem.
But when we went to thin thread, everything was different. And I don't know, a couple of things. This chart that I made, and I can make it available somehow. If anybody wants it, I'll email it to you. But what thin thread does for us, and then the demonstration we did is, and Dylan is probably going to find, or he has found out the same thing. That's why he's gone to thin thread too. And that is we can print faster with a single stroke. So we're not double stroking like we used to with our standard mesh. So it just takes one stroke. In fact, if we double stroked, it would be an insane amount of ink we're putting down. We print with less pressure because you don't have to jam it through. It's much easier. The opening is the percentage is greater, and so the ink just goes right through. We use less ink because even though the opening, the percentage is bigger, we're not pushing harder, and so we're not pushing into the shirt. We're just laying it on top, and so you end up using less ink. And we were going to actually weigh those out for you. We haven't got around to because we've been too busy, and then also Corona. But that's the plan this January, is that we're going to demo that by printing a shirt, same mesh count standard, printing a shirt, same mesh count thin, and then weighing both shirts, same image, and weighing both shirts to see how much ink is down.
Yeah, definitely. You're right on there. And here's another thing too, is when you're switching from standard to thin thread, you can actually move up in mesh count in thin thread and still get better coverage and you're going to use even less ink. The mesh manufacturers say, on average, you'll save 30% in ink because of moving up to a finer mesh count. You'll even get better detail in your print. So
that was the next thing, is this a detail. It's night and day. Like, we do a lot of races, or we used to, and the back of the shirt is always these sponsors, and everybody knows that you have, once you go over 10 sponsors and you have 20 or 30 sponsors, they just get so small and you can hardly see anything. Well, we used to put them in 230 mesh, and then that's a problem because you're trying to print on the back of a shirt with 230 mesh and clear the ink through that. That was a problem. And so now we can put it using thin thread. We just use a 180, and then the detail is incredible. It's awesome. And so the other thing, we print with less fibrillation because we've reduced down our pressure. And so we're not like disturbing that shirt as much and, making a fiber stand up. And then also, because of that, less dye migration. And so instead of like jamming the ink into the shirt and having the ink all the way down there, we're laying it on top.
Yeah, you nailed it. You really did. Those are definitely all the advantages with the thin thread. I will say the only disadvantage of thin thread, if you don't take care of it, you're going to spend more money in mesh. Okay. Regardless, you're going to spend more money in mesh because it doesn't last as long. But all those benefits, it creates all those savings, and you're going to be better off in the end. You'll end up saving more money.
Right. So you spend more money in mesh, right? But you're making more money because you're single stroking for one. You're not waiting on a double stroke. Right there. I don't even have to say anything else. Right there, you just made up for it.
And then just think of the softer hand feel that you get on the shirt. I mean, you guys, I don't sell shirts to customers or anything like that, but I'm sure your customer base, they all want that softer hand feel nowadays, right? They don't want that. Sure. They don't want that bulletproof, athletic print or anything like that. So,
I can't. For those who are listening and not watching on YouTube, every time I look over at Dylan, he has this giant beard on. Well, first of all, he's in a Santa outfit, and then he has this giant beard on, so I can't see his mouth. And I don't know if he's getting ready to talk. That's why I interrupted him earlier, or if he's smiling, or if he's like frowning, or what's going on. Dylan, you okay over there?
Yeah, I'm good. Okay. Full of eggnog, cookies, stuff like that.
I love the glasses too.
They were extra.
Yeah, you went all out. That's very nice.
Yeah. So back to screen printing. Do you guys have any tips for, I guess you said screen care, but like realistically, what should you do and what should you not do when it comes to like scrubbing your screens or just taking care of general anyway, like how you stack them or how you should dry them or whatever?
Yeah, the handling them is the biggest thing, right? When the screen typically pops, it's because of handling human error, right? The thin thread screen's more susceptible to that. So just got to just educate your employees and say, hey, listen, let's not throw the screens around for the most part. Another tip is let your reclaim chemical do the work. You might want to let it, dwell a little bit longer on the screens versus not
scrubbing
harder or hitting it with the pressure washer. Don't hit it with the pressure washer as long. Like I said, let the chemistry do its work. But the screen will last longer. It will help actually save the tension levels on the screens, and that's my tip for that as far as prolonging the life of the thin thread.
Yeah, and that's one thing, not to push M&R or anything, but I mean, I'm sure there's other like an eco rinse. And when I was talking to Rich Hoffman about that before, the thing that kind of clicked in my mind was he was talking about how with a standard shop, if you're just taking your screen, you're pressure washing it, you have all that pressure washer force on one side of the mesh, and you're kind of beating the piss out of the mesh. But with an eco rinse, it's pressure on both sides, and when they touch in the middle, it equals each other out. So you're not pushing on the mesh one way or the other. They're perfectly together, washing out the emulsion rather than pushing on the mesh and we converted to thin thread before we had the EcoText, and so we learned how to handle it in reclaim. And one of the best, I think, things to do is to use that
that seal. It's like a white caulk. And so it's like an extra, I know, I can't remember how much it is, but you just add the white seal around the inside of the frame around the edges. And it does a lot for you. One, the chemical doesn't get in there. So if you are letting the chemical do the work, it doesn't get in there as much, right? And then two, it protects that really vulnerable part of the screen, is that all those edges where, you get something in there, and that's where we have torn screens in the past anyway, especially in reclaim.
Sure. That's where a lot of pinholes start developing, is on that inside edge of the screen, just because there's more. It's not your sweet spot. It's a little tighter tension towards the inside edge of that frame. So you do create a lot of little pinholes. What Andy was referring to is our GSF screen sealant system. It's a 2-part system, and he's referring to the white seal that I use on the inside edge. That helps prolong the life of the screen. Customers that went to my sealant system that were using our standard screens saw a 20% drop in restretches going to the sealant system. So Andy only uses one part of it, but we have that permanent, with an asterisk, that permanent block out also. So now you don't have to use tape, less handling. You don't have to worry about the screens. And that's how the screens last longer, because you're not worried about someone ripping the tape off and then maybe accidentally ripping the screen. Less touching of the screens. So that all helps. I'm actually the one that came up. I didn't come up with the actual seal inside or the actual permanent block out on there. I came up with the process, right? It was probably, I think I'm going on 8 years now that I actually came up with the process. Someone approached me with the white seal, and I was like, I'm already doing that with a glue that we're using already. And I'm like, it's good. I like it and stuff, but I don't see how I can sell it. So then but I did like it. And I remember going to a shop, one of my customers, they have 20 automatics. I see 2 people sitting at a folding table, and a 6-foot wide folding table, and all they're doing is just peeling mesh off. I've seen like the utility knives they're trying to get it. I'm just thinking to myself, I don't care if you're paying that person a minimum wage. That person is costing you $25,000 a year just sitting and peeling tape off of screens. And that's when it just clicked to me, and I just like, what, we're going to eliminate that. And sure enough, like I said, my numbers that I looked at with some customers, I was like, why are sales down with them? These guys are busy. Why are sales down? And then I look at it and it's like, well, yeah, they converted everything to my GSF Elite screens. And that's where I got the number, 20% down. So, but
how many, what's your percentage? How many people order their screens with that package?
You know what? It's grown over the years, right? I actually have to look at the percentage, but I remember at one point we were averaging about 3,000 frames a month after about 4 years. And now I think we're up to about 6,000 frames a month that we're adding in. I can't, don't hold me to these numbers. I'd have to look at it, but the percentage has definitely grown over the years.
Yeah, we definitely like the white seal. My screen guy, I didn't even tell him about it, and then we got the screens, and he was telling me, he was like, "Oh, this is so much better because like no ink can get in there, and again, no chemical can get in there. It just seems better all around to kind of keep that stuff out."
The only drawback, there's 2 drawbacks with the sealant system, or complaints that I've had. It is if you're manually reclaiming, you get more of a spray backed. Okay. I always recommend just angle your frame a little bit and just change the angle. And then the other one is in the white seal, it takes a little bit longer to clean. You want to make sure you get it out there. It will dye, but your ink will eventually dry onto there. But that's the only thing. You need a little bit more elbow grease to make sure you're getting into the corner. You want to get like a scrub brush with a handle, and on the side where you can hit it with both sides. You know, you're doing.
Well, we tape the inside of our screens, not the outside, but we tape the inside, and it really doesn't get on that seal.
Yeah, us too. I'm just saying,
So-
like a little bit. If it was to happen, it's not so much.
Yeah, you're
I
gonna
love
see,
it though.
Yeah, the white seal definitely adds life to your screens. It really does.
Now, I've seen shops using two different types of scrubbers when it comes to cleaning screens. I've seen which is what we use, is it's like a blue pad with a white handle.
Sure.
Scrubbing, and then I've seen people with more of like a wooden handle brush. I don't know what the difference would be with the brush. I've never used the brush, but is there a reason for a brush over?
I can't honestly answer that. I'd like to scrub with the white handles. They're not too aggressive. The only problem is they start to deteriorate, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're not aggressive. They won't damage your screens, because you definitely don't want something too aggressive. Otherwise, what you start doing is start cutting those fibers. I mean, obviously you're not going to see it to the human eye, but you'll start scratching them more and more. And some scratching is good, don't get me wrong, for emulsion adhesion. But if you get too much, then now you're just damaging your mesh, and your screens aren't going to last.
Right. And that was one of the questions I had too about damaging the mesh. Is there a particular like dehazer? Because I know if you use a harsher dehazer, it eats away at those mesh fibers. Is there something that you would say? I think all dehazers are corrosive, and that's what eats it, right? I mean, that's the only way that you're going to get the ghosts out of your screen is, I mean, it eats away at it, right? And it does eat away at the mesh. Pastes are a little bit more corrosive, so there might be a little bit more aggressive. Especially, you can't leave it on very long, right? I mean, some pastes you only want on there for a couple minutes, and that's it. I would recommend maybe a liquid dehazer, or one of the things is careful on when you're washing your screens on press. Even don't use too hot of a chemical where you're creating that ghost image. When you're locking in the ink underneath the knuckles, and then use a good ink degrade. That all helps out, so you don't have to use a haze. But to answer your question, maybe a liquid haze is probably a little bit safer for the screens. May not work as well, right? But
Dylan, are you using a lot of Haze Remover anyway?
Not really. There was this stuff. Realistically, the only hazing we're ever getting is from using water base, especially like a water based black. And we have found some good, more eco-friendly chemical that takes that off. But for the most part, I mean, we're not having to dehaze a ton.
That's good.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I just didn't know if there was one that's more, it might be widely used by people, and you're like, like you as a manufacturer look at it and you're like, why the fuck are they using that? Like, stop.
I wouldn't. I would not try to use any kind of aggressive haze remover. I wouldn't want it. But again, I'm not a printer. I'm not in there, and
I just feel like at some point there's got to be a difference between, do you leave the haze on or do you use the dehazer that's actually killing your screen? You know what I mean? Like, is there a balance in between?
Yeah, you got to find a fine balance for that, right? I mean, if you really think about it, your screens are one of the least expenses that you have as far as producing your prints. If you think about it, how many prints that you're actually getting on each screen, restretching a screen, whether you do it yourself or send it out, if you really think about it and figure out how much you actually per print, what it costs you, I mean, 100,000ths of a penny, maybe, if you really think about it.
Yeah. No, so, for sure.
If a screen gets, too hazy, or you got too much ghost on there, rip it out if you can't use it, or use it on it, make sure you're only using it for a particular job or something, right?
Right.
But again, it's that fine balance. Everything. One thing I learned years ago is as much as some people try to make screen printing an exact science, it's not an exact science. There's so
I'm 100%
many,
behind you on that one.
yeah, there's so many variables, and what might work for your shop isn't going to work for the guy's shop down the road, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, that's one thing I learned a long time ago.
Yeah. Now I know this is kind of like a great debate between all printers, and we've had this conversation, but give me your take on the difference between statics rollers or like the new click stretch ones. I know you're biased, obviously, because you're on one side of it.
I am a little biased, I'm going to be honest, but it's more about a shop philosophy. Roller frames are great, okay, don't get me wrong, but again, it's always finding that balance as far as dollars and cents and what it's worth to you. Roller frames from the beginning were great. They opened up probably the same time we started manufacturing screens. Mesh back then wasn't low elongation mesh, so there was a really big need for roller frames to retweak, right? To keep that tension up there. Not everyone stretches like we do. You can get more tension on the roller frames, but it's a shop philosophy. And are you really going to spend time? Are you going to have someone back there checking every screen and retweaking it? You know, if you're doing that, great, no problem. Just what works best for you. I'm not sold on those click frames. I don't think they're great when you first put the mesh on there, but I don't think they hold tension. Okay. There's advantages and disadvantages to everything. My recommendations to anyone that's in the shop, find what works best for you. Not only your workflow, but dollars and cents is the most important thing. If you send screens out to be restretched, just make sure whoever's stretching your screens is stretching it properly. Make sure the tension levels are correct. I mean, you know, there's always that debate. I need 30 newtons on a screen. Well, okay, you do and you don't, all right? Because you can probably print the same job with one of my screens that has 25 newtons, and you probably are not going to tell the difference in the print unless you put it underneath a microscope. For the human eye, there's not really that much of a difference between a 25 newton screen or a 35 newton screens. People will debate me on that, but it's probably because someone is partial to rollers, and then someone's partial to stretch and glue screens, right?
And that's what's funny about this industry is like we're talking about like newtons on a screen and like all this like thin thread versus hydro and all this other stuff. And it's like realistically, the end customer who gets the shirt doesn't give a shit at all. Like they're just like, oh yeah, that sure looks awesome. I'm going to wear that to a party. And it's like, we're like, yeah, we need that specific newtons. And it's like, you know, I get that like we're the manufacturers and we're trying to make the best product possible. And I feel like we do, but I feel like there's so much like debate and argue over like certain things like you're saying. Like if I have, 30 newtons versus 25, it's like,
I always think of that.
Is your shop producing? And do your prints look awesome or not? Like that's like the question, I guess.
So attention, your tension is important, right? Because that's going to give you your print quality, right? But as far as registration on the job, what's most important is consistent tension between each screens that you're using for that job, whether it's 25 newtons or 20 newtons, right? If you're using a screen that's 25 newtons or 30 newtons and using a screen that's at 20 newtons, it's going to take it's going to be a little harder to register that job. But if they're all at 20, the registration is going to be there. Your print quality is going to be more than acceptable, right? But you can, 25 newton screen, your print quality might be a little bit better, right?
All right.
Less off contact. So again, bottom line is what makes money in your shop, right? I had a guy come up to me at a trade show. This was years ago. He's like, oh, your screens suck. I was like, who are you, right? You don't even know who I am. Yeah, just stretch and glue screens suck. Well, you don't know me, all right? It's like, I took a roller frame and I printed on water. I'm like, you what? I actually achieved a print on water with a roller frame. I was like, oh, wow, good for you. What did you do it for? Did you make any money at it? It's like, no, I just wanted to prove that I can do it. Good for you, right? I mean, I don't need...
And then you fucking uppercutted him across the room.
I would like to, but I'm just thinking to myself, you know, it's like, well, how did that make you money, right? So, again, going back, I'm not going to recommend one screen over another. It's a shop's philosophy.
It's what works for you. Is the biggest question.
Well, both our shop here and Dylan, we could buy roller frames. We could afford to do it. You know, we have nice equipment, and we want to invest in the best equipment and the best supplies, whether it's ink or emulsion or roller frames or statics or whatever press it is. I mean, we can do that here, but we chose not to. You know, we looked at our situation, and I brought frames in here. You know, I tried out all kinds of different frames. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to decide, like, which is the best move? Like, what's the best move for us right now? Should we go to all rollers or not? And we decided not to. And the reason why we decided not to is because we could achieve the results we wanted for this shop here and for the work that we were doing with thin thread statics. And I mean, fuck, you can't even with thin thread, you don't want to tension it that high in the first place. So one good thing about having rollers is we could retension it, but by the time we use thin thread, by the time we're done, by the time it loses its tension, I mean, it's probably going to pop pretty soon anyway. And so what are we going to retension it and then pop them? You know, and so it's like the work we were doing, it looks fantastic. And if it didn't, then I'd go get some roller frames. You know, if we were putting out crummy, shitty work, I wouldn't use statics. I wouldn't use your frames. And so I'm not saying, like you said, I'm not saying that rollers aren't good and they don't have their place in a shop, you know, depending on what work they're doing. But like back to what you were saying a minute ago, Dylan, you know, it's funny, like sometimes I set up a job and I set it up on a brand new, awesome, fast ass press. And I've used like really nice emulsion to coat the screen. And I have thin thread mesh and, you know, everything's right. You know, I used a CTS to make it and all these great things, right? And it's just like this one color scribble of nothing that I'm putting on a shirt. And I'm like, wow, you know, I could have done this in my garage. Like basically the first week I learned how to screen print. I could have done this on my wooden frames, but yet I have all this, you know? And so sometimes it's sort of like it'd be sort of like having, doing DoorDash in like a Lamborghini or something, you know, it's just like overkill. Yeah. But there are a lot of jobs. There are those everyday jobs that come through here that are 6 color and 7 color and that have detail to them, and that we use a tri-sync system. And so, like you just said, extremely important thing, have consistent tension. And so it sets up and it tri-syncs, you know, without having to move them.
Exactly. Don't get me wrong. Stretch and glue screens, ridge screens, you want to make sure whoever you're buying them from, they're doing a good job, because the one thing that you don't want...
if you're not buying them from Frank, you're fucking up. We're going to say that right now.
I appreciate it.
You're doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong.
I appreciate it. But yeah, you want to stabilize the tension and everything. So you just make sure whoever's doing your screens is doing it properly. You know, some people that tout roller frames, they're touting it because they probably didn't get a good ridged aluminum screen. So that's just my thing. It's just the philosophy, to answer your question, Dylan.
Yeah, they didn't. I mean, I
get it.
They didn't get a guy who pre-tensioned the actual aluminum, who pre-tensioned the screens, who gave it a lot of love as they were making them.
Yeah,
the thing is too is there's a lot of places like distros that you get your ink from and all this other place, and they're like, yeah, we stretch frames too. Yeah, like, do you want us to do it too? And then you end up getting those, and you're like, you know, they might be okay, and you print, but then you try the real good stuff. Like when I got Frank screens, like I could tell the difference. Like I know he puts GSF stickers on everything, but like if I didn't have the sticker, I bet I could point his screens out in my screen room
from across the room
versus the other one. I'm just saying, like on the racks, I notice now, like just the thickness of the aluminum and whatever else, I can tell the difference between his screens and one of the other ones.
Yeah.
So
it's well, I don't know what else to really say about that.
I can too. I mean, I know your screen. I absolutely do. There's a giant difference between how it feels, the weight of it, the color of the glue, everything about it, man.
Sure. That's it. That's very important also is when you're stretching a stretching glue screen, making sure you're using the right adhesive, right? You want something that is chemical solvent resistant. You don't like the instant glues. I'm not a huge fan of. They're very brittle, and if you don't trim them right, you can cut your hands on there. I have about 8,000 square feet of stretching tables, and I only have 6 guys stretching, right? There's a rotation, and it takes about 45 minutes for a screen to be completed, and they rotate. I can use this instant glue that I could cut down my production space to a quarter of it and have half the guys and probably produce the same thing. But the adhesive is a very important when you're talking about a stretching glue screen. So,
I've gotten screens before from, cheaper companies, and literally like 2 days in, the corners have already the glue came undone.
Sure.
Or, 2 washes in, the glue came undone. And it's like, then you got to call them and be like, hey, 3 of the screens out of that new batch just fell apart.
And hopefully they took care of you, right? We always stand behind our screens. I couldn't afford to replace everything, so I used the best equipment. I used the best product out there that I know of, right? So, but I stand behind my screens.
Right. No, that's awesome. Well, I had one of the questions I had too, and I've seen this around, is do you have a way where if you get a screen that gets a little hole in it or a tear, like a method to fix that hole so it'll hold for a while where you can still use that screen? I've seen people put emulsion on it and then dip it and then not blow it out so it fully hardens around that hole.
Awesome question.
You can do that.
Kind of like a patch. Like if you have a tire.
We've done it before where we put a little bit of emulsion on and then just you can lock it up if you dip it and then don't wash it out.
There's a couple of different ways that what you can do, right? The easiest way is getting maybe a Mylar tape, a silver tape, so that it stands out that there's a hole there. So you're always looking for it, or a different color tape. The problem with that is sometimes it washes out and you reclaim. Another thing is the patch. You can take a scrap piece of mesh and glue it down to that spot, right? Huh. And you're patching it up.
Because we have screens that are you just bought them, and then you do a job that you got a little hole in it, you accidentally dropped something on it and it put a little hole in it, or the guy reclaiming accidentally stabbed it somehow. Or sure. I mean, there's a million ways you can put a hole in a screen.
Do you sell a patch kit?
I don't. But
he doesn't yet.
Take an old screen that is ripped, take that piece of mesh and glue it onto there, make a patch with
I just have to buy some glue, I guess.
Yeah, I can sell you glue. That's not a problem.
Can you just use super glue just for that one spot? Because you're obviously not going to print over that hole. You're just saving that hole.
You could just make sure that you make it smooth, because super glue is like that. CA glue, I call it. I always have trouble pronouncing it, but that's all that CA glue, that clear hard glue is. So you just want to make sure that it's smooth and it's not, because then you're gonna have problems coating your screens. As your edge of your scoop coater, it's gonna chatter up there, and then it's gonna just create a mess for you.
Frank doesn't want us patching our screens. He wants them to tear.
No, I'm the opposite.
What if you just got that permanent blockout stuff? Like you got a little jug of it, you could put that on there. Probably.
You sure can. It's all up to you how you want to handle your screens.
I don't know if the blockout will do it though. It seems like the patch would, because it's reinforcing that area around it. Why would just a little?
Well, I'm just saying like sewing wise, if you were to make on a button up shirt, you make the slit where you put the button in. They just it's a cut with a sew on top and a sew on bottom. You're just stopping it from wanting to pop and rip the rest of the mesh.
It would harden around there. The emulsion, you can harden the emulsion. There's a hardener you can actually put it on there and just expose it and make it harder. You can do it that way. The patch is probably the best way of doing it, only because what happens if that hole pops on press? So is a $14 screen really worth the $30 you're going to waste cleaning up your press?
Good point. Well, not just cleaning up your press, the downtime. So like, let's say that these days, if I see a hole, it's out. Like, and we don't even, there's no patching, there's no nothing. Because with thin thread, if I see a hole, I know it's just a matter of time. And the last thing I want is for us to expose that screen, tape it up, put it on press, and we're printing, and then for it to fail. And then we're down until we get a new screen, or we have to print under a job. I mean, that's that'll cost you way more than just restretching it. So if the only way I'm going to put a patch on it or try to extend the life out of it, if it really does work.
Yeah, and even if you put the patch on, the patch will work. Make sure you circle it with a Sharpie or something, because you would hate for that to be anywhere in your prints, right? So make it so that your employees notice it right away. Because that's another thing. Then you go back, you're gonna have to go burn another screen, right? And then there's more downtime.
There's one other thing that I saw that I wanted to question you about was people, when you stretch your mesh onto the screen, are you tilting the mesh a certain way so that you can have less moire patterns in prints?
I'm putting a mesh on a degree. No, we're actually stretching it 90 degrees up straight. Okay. I do jobs where customers request on a 22.5 degree. Okay. What that helps with putting the mesh on a degree, what it helps is your sawtoothing, your edges, right? It just mesh interference. That's all that is making sure there's no mesh interference. And that's what causes a moire pattern. And here, before I forget, I'm going to give you a little tip right now. If you ever have a screen that you don't know what mesh count it is, as long as you have a reference point of a screen that you know is a 110, if you put a screen mesh to mesh and tilt it a little bit, you see a moire pattern, that's the same mesh, just to let you know. And that's all that's happening is the threads are getting in the way and causing that moire pattern. Now, a lot of the moire patterns can be eliminated in your pre-press, in your artwork, just changing the degree of your dots, right? Unless you're printing a lot of halftones, you're really not going to get any really moire problems, right? Unless you're printing a lot of halftones and fine.
You choose the right mesh count, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had it before. I've had it before where I'm doing like a big circle of ink or whatever, and then I go to print. You do your white underbase and then you do your color on top, and you see a moire like through the top color completely. Do you have any tips for anything like on press if you see it? Do you just reburn one of the screens, or? Yeah,
you have to rechange the screen, either bump up or bump down in mesh count, and that'll eliminate it if you get that moire pattern.
I think that we had that too. We haven't had it on thin thread, and we had that too on standard, because what I don't know if this is right, but my theory of what caused that is that when you print and you're laying down that layer of ink, that those threads are thicker than the layer of ink that you're putting down, and so it's like making an impression on there.
Yeah, you can look at the ink and actually see like the mesh lines in it.
Yeah, one thing to eliminate that is make sure you have a thicker stencil. That'll help it. Make sure your stencil wasn't too thin. Right. Making sure you get enough ink that you don't have mesh interference. That's all that is it comes down to mesh interference.
Was that on a PFP white or just an underbase white?
I don't know. I mean, it happens once in a great while. We haven't had it in a long time, but I just remember before we definitely had that where we did I think it was probably like a PFP white and then like a red on top, and it was just like, whoa, that's
exactly
super pattern.
Yeah, and you can change your angles in your artwork. That'll help eliminate it. I'm going to be honest, I don't have a lot of customers, really textile customers, complaining to me about moire patterns. If there's anything, I would have got it from my graphic customers, because they're printing a 380 mesh or a 420 mesh, right? Mm-hmm. And they're probably printing like an 85 line. I'm thinking you guys are probably set around 45, 55 line for the most part.
Yeah.
So, So that's it's part of the business. And like I said, the quickest fix is just change your mesh count.
Right. No, that makes total sense. Now I've seen other shops too. Do you guys make anything else other than screens? Like if somebody needs a custom something, can they come to you to weld it or make it?
Yeah, I make a lot of custom racks. My job carts. I actually,
that's what I saw was your job cart. I think, was it Brett on the Slack group posted that Frank made him some carts?
Yeah. Was it Brett?
Brett.
For
Threads,
yeah. We just sent him some. We do a lot of different. We make custom racks, right? Drying racks or just rolling racks. Job carts. That's why I had guys working today too. So I got to deliver a few of them to a customer Monday. The job carts, where we just basically have an ink shelf and then we have slots for 12 screens. Roll it out to the press with the next 3 jobs, right, or 2 jobs or whatever.
Now, is that a custom thing, or do you just have that, or if somebody's like, "Hey, I want a job cart," you're like, "All right."
Yeah, they're custom. We have standards, but I don't stock anything. They're custom made to order.
Right.
What I gave Brett was actually just a rolling rack, basically, right? It just like kind of like a dolly rack. He just stacks screens on 2 stacks and rolls them around. But he's got a bunch of my job carts. He's got a bunch of my racks. I just made him a rack for his rapid tag screens. It was kind of cool. It was
dude, I need one of those.
It was a smaller rack. I'll send you some pictures of it. It was a smaller rack, and it held, each side held like 36 rapid tag screens, and there was just two slots on each, 2 rows of each on each side, and we do all kinds of stuff. I mean, I've made some interesting things, right?
That's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, I have the aluminum. I have the welding capability. Why not, right? That was always my philosophy. So
I know we've touched on a ton of stuff, but is there anything we haven't touched on that you guys offer at your company?
No, I think we pretty much. I'm all pretty much pre-press, and we're known for screens. That's what we do. I do sell other supplies, but all pre-pressed. No inks or printing presses, right? We help each other. I help my customers out. It was just, evolution of GSF has been really weird or crazy because, like I said, we started just making frames. Then customers say, "Hey, I need you to stretch my screens." Okay, we'll stretch them for you. Hey, I need some supplies. Okay, we'll get you. We'll be your one-stop shop, right? But we always came back, and our bread and butter is just aluminum screens. That's what we're known for. That's what we're always going to be known for, right?
It's awesome. Yeah. Do you what's next for you guys? Do you have any like evolution in screens?
I don't know. I don't know. It's the last one was our Sealant System, our GSF Elite screens. I'm thinking about some other things. I just don't know if there's a market for it. I know, screen printing is definitely changing. I've seen it in the graphic sides. I'm starting to see it on the textile side. The digital age is coming. It's here. You guys, I watched your podcast with Kenneth, right? That thing's awesome. It really is. I think screen will always be around, but it is. You guys are going to start to adapt. I need to adapt, right? So
even with digital squeegee, you still need 4 screens.
Sure. Sure.
So,
but not 8 or 10 anymore, right?
But not
right. You've got to find a way to get by still.
Exactly.
Customers buying 10 screens instead of 100.
Exactly. So, but no, I really think screen printing will be around for quite a long time, and it'll be a lot. I'll be dead, that's for sure, before it ever goes away. You need it. There's a lot of interesting things that are screen printed. Some people think of screen printing just textile, right? I mean, there's so much more to it. There really is. So,
Andy, do you want to start hitting them with the Inksoft question?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Go ahead.
Well, we are sponsored by Inksoft, as you know, and they have a question every episode. And this one is, do you have any New Year's resolutions or a New Year's resolution?
You know what? Like everyone else, to lose weight. This whole COVID thing, I gained weight, and that's my New Year's resolution. Who knows? I'm not really good on keeping New Year's resolutions. So, but that definitely is my goal this year.
Well, in the pre-COVID days,
I'm with you on that one. I need to, like, I babied and took care of my business and everything around me for like so many years now. And I think I'm finally getting to the age where I'm just like, I have to actually stop being an asshole and like take care of myself or work out and do something.
Exactly.
I see the decline, and I see like my sleep and like all this other stuff. And I'm just like,
it doesn't get any better if you don't do something about it. And so, that would be mine
too. Yeah. Andy, what's yours?
Well, I was going to say the pre-COVID resolution used to be that, like you said, and then you'd go the gym membership would go crazy in January, and then by January 20th, nobody's going anymore. But now I think one of the hardest things for gyms anyway is just getting to the gym, and so maybe if you have some sort of home gym or just anything, whether it's just going for a walk or whatever, then that's a start. Maybe it's easier now. I see all these people posting about their home gyms and just like, so jealous, like Joe Rogan even. It's incredible, like what
Joe Rogan's got the money to blow on a home gym.
True. But you don't need a whole, so when we go to, we went yesterday, I go 3 times a week, and I have a personal trainer, and you know what? We really don't use anything. It's literally just like these rubber bands.
There's people like my wife's brother who literally lifts like 2 like milk jugs filled with water. It's like, you can't get any cheaper than that.
I'm trying to think what we used, equipment we use. We do pull-ups. We use our own body weight. Like, we really don't need, I think the investment would be about $100. Literally.
I'd like to get one of those ellipticals. That was one of the things when I used to work out and go to the gym would be cardio. That's the most important thing.
I think I'm just going to get those things where I lay on the couch and eat chips and watch TV, and the electrodes just shake my shit all day. Yeah. That seems like the best way to go for me.
I'm sure that'll work.
Yeah, let me know if it does.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to lose this Santa belly.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a shitload of them in this episode, but do you have any other like tips or tricks or shop hacks or anything that you can think of?
No, I really can't.
I mean, you gave us a bunch of them.
Yeah, so. Not anymore. I don't. You guys nailed a lot of them. I watch your podcast and everything, and I don't think I got anything else for you.
I think the best. I think we did nail them. And to recap, like how important it was, and what you stressed to me is just first off, get a tension meter if you don't have one. Know your tension. I mean, that's just I think that's the very first starting point of controlling like that variable. Knowing if your screen, this is why we switched to a different restretchers. We were getting screens in. We didn't have a tension meter, and I was assuming they were tight. They were what we wanted. I was assuming it, and then over time, I was noticing like these just aren't really. I didn't have anything to compare them to. Like I wasn't getting in fresh batches that were like really, really different. And so they were crummy. They were terrible. I got a tension meter and I found out some of them didn't even register. That's how bad they were. Like I didn't know that was such a thing. They didn't register on my tension meter. And so, get a tension meter, start there, because so many of your problems, like ghosting, if you're double hitting a white or something, so many of your problems start there. Tension meter. It was a great tip earlier.
And I feel like this is a screen printing 101 thing, but it's really just needs to get drove into people's minds is like, stop thinking of like your screen guy as like the bottom of the barrel guy in the shop. Like pre-press is like super important. Like if you take the time to do like good screens and you pay attention to what your EOM is and you get all that stuff dialed in, printing is so much easier. Like just having things burned and ready for your guy on press, or, making sure your screens are cleaned and there's no pinholes in your screens. And you got to think, guys with pinholes before, it was like when you get on press, you print 100 shirts and find out there's 2 pinholes, or
Put up your job.
yeah, you got to like stop and tape stuff. It's like, just take care of all that stuff first. Like that should be your priority.
Let me add to that tension meter. It's very important to have a tension meter, but another thing is make sure that tension meter is calibrated every 6 months to a year. Okay.
And Frank will do that for you too. I sent mine to him.
I will.
And actually make sure, and the second part B to that is don't buy it too cheap of one.
Don't. I've actually bought some from Amazon. Got them overseas. They're $100, whatever. They work good for about 2 weeks. And then when we check them against our digital ones and everything else, they're just crap. Tension meters aren't cheap. You're going to spend $300 to $400 minimum on them. Like I said, I will recalibrate for you. I just won't certify them for you. But if you ever want to check them into me, bring them in and I'll do them, because we send ours out religiously every 6 months. I got one that cost me like $1,200, a digital one, really nice one even. I mean,
Andy has that he hasn't given back yet.
No, Andy has my $1,000 thickness gauge meter though.
Yeah, that thing's awesome.
Other tools are the thickness gauge meter. An aqua check is a really good tool to have to make sure you don't have moisture in your screens, in your emulsion itself.
That's really good. Weren't you telling me or somebody here about some sort of device that can measure if the screen is exposed all the way?
That's just your Stouffer scale. You can use a Stouffer scale.
What's that?
Like Stouffer's lasagna?
No, like a 21-step grayscale. Hold on one second.
Oh, no. I know. You're talking about just an exposure calculator.
Well, not an exposure calculator. That's actually different than a 21-step. Hold on one second. Let me grab it real quick.
Yep, sure. Hey there, Dylan. Is that you? I can't tell.
Hey.
It's like you want to hold a 6 or 7. That's all this is. Throw it on your screen every once in a while. As you expose it, you want to hold a number 7 as you exposing it, and just making sure that your screens are exposed correctly. They're not underexposed or overexposed. You just have issues in your reclaim. They're really cheap, and just leave it by your exposure unit and do a check every once in a while. It's like putting a piece of film on your screens, and then when you develop it, you're washing it out, and you want to hold 7 steps under. That's a great tool to have. All these tools are great for your QC and everything. You don't have to have them. Talk to your local supplier and say, hey, can I borrow it? Or, so this year, they're cheap. Everyone should have them in their shops.
Yeah, I think if you're going to make one investment, start with the tension meter, and then the thickness gauge, like you said, is expensive, but I want one. You told me not to buy one, but yeah, I want one. I really do. I want to be able to.
Well, if you really want to go out there, get an RZ meter.
What's that?
It actually checks the smoothness of your screens. I'm just kidding. You don't have to waste your money on that. But there is that.
He just bought one. He's looking into it as soon as this episode's over.
Sounds awesome, though. Yeah. Well, let's see. So we have some quick takes.
Yeah, let's do it. What's the first thing you do in the morning?
Brush my teeth.
Rolls right out of bed into brushing.
Yeah. You mean when I come to work or when I'm at home?
Hey, either. I'm good with either.
Yeah, I brush my teeth, jump in the shower, come to work.
What do you do when you get to work first thing in the morning? Because mine is not at all work related. Like when I get here in the morning, I have time to myself because nobody's here because I get here early, and I'll eat my breakfast and I'll watch YouTube videos, and that has nothing to do with printing. It's just me by myself getting ready for the day.
Yeah, I every day come in here, turn the lights on, just making sure, see what got finished up last night, come to my computer and actually watch some YouTube videos.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
See, me and Frank are on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
Well, I don't brush my teeth first out of bed. I go to the shower first. I don't know why. And then I go to put my contacts in, and then I brush my teeth. But that's really interesting stuff. But what I do when I first get here, never do I watch YouTube videos first. So I'm going to try that tomorrow, though.
You should. It puts you in a different mindset.
It does, and then, like Dylan said, you're like left alone. No one's bothering you. You know, and especially I watch them at night too. But if I'm watching them during the day, and I got employees coming in, they're thinking I'm playing games. And what kind of examples am I setting? Right.
Well, maybe here's the difference: is that you don't really have a commute, Dylan, and I have. I drive 15 minutes, and so that 15 minutes is my alone time, or is my time I'm thinking or listening to a podcast or whatever, getting ready for the day. So by the time I'm here, I'm ready to go.
I'm just saying, like, I could get up in the morning at home and like automatically be like, oh, it's Tuesday or whatever. And you start thinking about the jobs you got to get out or the talks you have to have with certain employees. And it's like, I have that mode in my head of what I'm thinking. And then I sit down and I watch like a funny YouTube video or something that's, educational or whatever, and it puts me in a better mood. It makes me like ready when, okay, it's 9:00 and start time for me to start. I just like shut them off, and now I'm like, I feel like I'm in a better place. I'm ready to go.
Understand.
Yeah.
All right, second one.
Best recent purchase.
Oh, for work, it would probably be some grinding equipment. Yeah.
That was one thing. That was one thing we can ask too. Is like when people send you restretches, do you get a lot that are just like terrible that you have to like grind
dirty or something?
Down? Yeah, just like dirty screens.
Yeah. Our policy is we don't want screens with wet ink or any excessive tape on there. If it's too much, if there's way too much ink on there, I'll hit you with a cleaning charge. Okay. I don't want my guys picking up the frames, getting it on their hands, and then getting that ink on all my other equipment. So that's why I tell them.
Yeah, but even if they cut the mesh off and rip the mesh off, like still the old glue and stuff, you have to grind all of those, right?
Yeah, we take all that off, and I don't care if there's mesh or glue on there. We take that all off. When the screen comes into us, most people don't even know this, and I probably should mention this, but we actually check for squareness and flatness of the screen.
That's important.
Of the frame, you mean?
Yeah, the frame itself before we even send it to our stretching department. So usually customers send up beat up screens. They're going back a lot better than they came into me. So it's one of our services.
Do you have a way to like re-square it or bend it or something? To get
we just check it with measurements. Yeah. Yeah, we'll put them back into if they're warped where they're rocking up and down. The two corners are rocking up and down. We'll straighten it out for you so that it's level. We're not a machine shop, but it's pretty flat, right? So
nice.
But that's one of our services that we do. We stretch a lot of screens that customers have bought over the years that aren't even ours. So we want to make sure everything's square for them.
Right. Oh, that's awesome.
Do you reject some of them when you get them? If you're like,
we will. It's amazing some of the screens that we do stretch that are so beat up, but then we definitely make calls to customers and say, hey, listen, we got to retire this screen. It's we got to throw it in the scrap pile, or I'll send it back to you. Unable to stretch.
That's a nice way to put it. We got to retire this screen.
So.
All right, next, Dylan.
Last book read or listened to.
Yeah, I don't listen or read books.
Just shirt show.
That's not a book.
It's not a book, but I'm reading magazine articles. I'm on the internet and stuff. I'm definitely reading industry stuff. Last book, probably Killing Mockingbird back in high school.
Oh, that doesn't count.
I'm going to be honest. So
you haven't read a book since high school, really? That's awesome.
Well, I can't say that I have. I mean,
I don't blame you. I've only honestly done a couple, and they're like specific, like industry stuff, and I didn't read them. I listened to them. It was an audiobook.
Yeah.
I get it. We have busy lives. I get it. All right.
Oh, Arnold Palmer?
Yeah, definitely.
Hell yeah.
Get some sponsorship for him.
That's a good one. We used to pound those. And then I found out how much sugar and high fructose corn syrup are in them, and I was like, I probably shouldn't drink those as much.
It said light on there.
Yeah, I get the light. It makes it all better, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So here's a real important one. Chicago, New York, or St. Louis style pizza?
I don't know what St. Louis is, but
I think it's just frozen pizza. St. Louis ain't got shit.
I'm going to take a lot of slack for this, but I actually like New York style pizza.
Hell yeah.
The deep dish Chicago pizza. I like it, but I actually like New York style. The really thin crust and everything, you fold it over.
I like the Chicago, how they do the sauce on top.
Yeah, that's a deep dish. I'm not a huge fan of deep dish. So
right on.
It's just more of like it's not even really pizza though. It's like you have to eat it with a fork.
You do. I mean, you can get regular. We got great pizza. Don't get me wrong. I think Chicago probably has the best food, all just in general. I've been to New York. I've been St. Louis, and I just like it. Wherever. Chicago does have the best food in general.
Easy.
No, you guys come into town. I'll take you to some restaurants when this whole COVID thing is, whether it's Italian steak.
I'm down.
Yeah.
I'm always down to eat. I don't care.
Yeah. I really think we got the best food though. But I will say New York style pizza I like that better.
What's a place that you really want to visit once COVID's over?
I have no ambition of traveling outside of the United States at all.
Do you go to like Long Beach and stuff like that?
I do. Yeah, we exhibit. Yeah, definitely. We do 3 or 4 trade shows a year.
Yeah, I saw you there just this year. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and tell you about how I printed on water with one of my static printers.
I'll never forget that story. I'm going to be honest. I just looked at this guy and I just like, do me a favor, get away from me. I don't take a lot of vacations. I take extended weekends when, 3 or 4 day weekends. But I'm not a big guy in traveling. Just never have been. So
it's all right.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of flying either, but my ambition and wanting to go places outweighs that fear. So I just do it anyway.
Yeah. See, I actually love flying. I'm that guy that before we take off from the gate, I'm that guy snoring in the seat. Flying doesn't bother me.
Not me. I'm staring forward, both hands on the thing, sweating the entire time. Every bump, I'm just like, let me out.
I heard flying's better than ever now. I heard it's cleaner. I heard it's less crowded and just easier all around. Like,
I've heard the same thing.
It was great when I came to see you, Andy. Like the plane was empty. I didn't even I literally was the only person in line in Syracuse to go through TSA. Like it was I felt like an idiot because you know how they weave back and forth. And I did like 10 of those by myself to get to the front of the line. Like the one dude just looking right at me and I'm just like, nope, doing the whole thing. And I just like walked the whole loop.
Yeah.
It was funny. We were really looking forward to this episode. We really wanted to get out a bunch of screen knowledge and share the stuff that, we learned from you and definitely the improvements we've put in our shops from the screen. So definitely happy that you did this with us.
You guys got plans for the holiday?
We don't have plans for just sort of like what we did for Thanksgiving. I mean, we're just, it's going to be a small nothing really, it's crazy. What's going on right now. So it's what it is though. And we'll just spend some time, some downtime. We're going to close for like 10 days. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. It's actually only 4 work days how it works out, but we're going to close for 10 days. But I hope I conveyed how helpful you've been the past couple of years as we've converted over and tried to learn about screen mesh because, you get so busy with just trying to get jobs out the door and, that there's certain problems that you want to work on and you just don't have the time. And I really do. I thank you for being there and helping me.
You're welcome.
Get to the next level for sure.
Yeah.
And, thanks again. Thanks for all that. And I'm glad you came on the show and I hope everybody, gained some knowledge about screens today.
Yeah. I thank you for having me on. Anyone has questions, they always feel free to contact me.
And you can borrow anything that's his and not give it back.
You have to give it back.
Eventually.
So, otherwise you get a bill.
All right, Frank. Well, we appreciate it, man. We'll see you later.
Yeah, guys, have a great Christmas. Happy New Year. And, hopefully like this COVID thing's over and we get back to normal, right?
Yeah. And we'll hang out and get some food.
Definitely.
Cheers to that.
All right, man.
All right, guys, have a great night.
See you, dude.
Bye.
Hey.
Are you sweating underneath there?
Very much so.
You could have taken the beard off,
No.
I don't know. I don't know how you did it. You committed. Like you weren't playing around. You were Santa.
What?
You were fucking Santa the whole
Claus.
the whole episode.
Yeah. I literally bought this just for this. It was like $100.
You're crazy, dude. All right.
But
Well,
it was like, I just more wanted to do it, honestly, not to be Santa, but at all, but just to see the look on your face when I popped up, because you're always like, why didn't you warn me about this thing you were going to do? And I just really wanted to be like, you motherfucker. That was worth $100. I just wanted to see the look on your face. That's all it was worth for me.
Well,
it's because I love you.
Glad that you got some joy at my expense. Cool. And your expense, apparently.